I think the biggest thing is empathy. Our capacity to have empathy towards other people is the single most important thing we can possibly exercise. But unfortunately, like many other skills like math or anything like that, if you don't use it, you tend to lose this skill. So it's important to try your best to exercise it every day. And it's easy for us to have sympathy because sympathy is based on liked experiences. It's even harder for you to have empathy for somebody who's going through something you've never gone through before. That's where most charitable actions start from, is empathy.
Welcome to the On Being Human podcast, where we believe transforming ourselves can positively transform society. Your host, Brandy Fleck, has the honor of exploring the human condition with real people who bravely share their personal stories of adversity, healing, joy, and more. If you're seeking empowerment, strength, and inspiration, listen in to engage and explore tough topics that help us humanize one another, understand ourselves better, spread love, and connect.
Welcome back this week to the On Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Fleck. Andy Littlefield of Smyrna, Tennessee is a returning guest from the finale of last season, Season 1 of the On Being Human podcast. He's a Marine veteran who helps other veterans in his spare time. He loves his family and also works in the surgical supply industry. Andy is an essential employee amidst the lockdown orders of the COVID-19 pandemic. We discuss what it's like being an essential employee. Everything from how Andy sanitizes at work to how it impacts his family. We discuss supplies, helping others in need. We discuss Andy's opinions and insights into how the government is handling the crisis, how the public is handling the crisis, and why it makes sense to bring the military in to help. You get strength to do the right thing. Sanitize, help others if you can safely from a distance, and share supplies, because we're all in this together. You get insight into what it's like being an essential employee and the feelings that come along with that. Plus, with Andy's military service, you also get insight into how veterans are equipped to deal with what we're all going through right now, and also how social isolation may be impacting veterans, the public at large, and what issues we may want to deal with once we're able to emerge from the difficult yet necessary measures to stay safe. Andy is part of the Irreverent Warriors organization. One of their main points in the Season 1 finale was the issue of veteran suicide and PTSD. Andy and the Irreverent Warriors, plus other veteran organizations, are still here to help, even during this time of social distancing and lockdowns, and we list many online resources in the show notes. Andy also tells us how we can help if the desire strikes and gives us an update on the Irreverent Warriors' Silky's Hike initiatives that have been postponed but are still going strong in planning. Subscribe to the On Being Human podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Help us out by leaving a rating and review. You can also find this episode at onbeinghumanpodcast.com/episodes/041, where you'll also find the links that Andy mentions throughout this episode. Want more love? Visit onbeinghumanpodcast.com and sign up with your name and email address, and I'll send you a free gift. It's a personal mantra that I use daily, and I promise no spam whatsoever. Just one little mantra with a big impact. You can also join in the conversation with us on Facebook. That's at On Being Human Podcast. Now, let's hear from Andy. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Good. So you've been on the show before. You were in the Season 1 finale, actually. But if you would, please go ahead and introduce yourself just to familiarize our listeners with who you are, what you do both professionally and as a volunteer and in your spare time.
Well, my name's Andy Littlefield. Professionally, I work as the returns coordinator for a local surgical device company. And so in that job, what I do is just kind of like the returns people at Walmart. Anytime a hospital or a clinic needs a return as a specific surgical device, they mail it in, and I process it, inspect it, and issue the credit and put it back into stock. I also take care of any complaints that they have. So when those come in, I'll have to wash and sanitize them and then take pictures and start the investigation process.
Okay.
On a personal note, what I do on my spare time is I'm involved in 6 different veteran service organizations. I'm an officer in 3 of them. Primarily, I'm the commandant of the Marine Corps League of Rutherford County. If you've ever been inside a VFW or American Legion, it's along the same lines. We don't have bars. Go figure. You think Marines would have bars, but we don't. So because of that, our focus is raising money to help the veterans in our community. We typically we host a bingo night once a month at the VA hospital in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We also are starting up 2 scholarships for graduating seniors. We'll be able to award those for next school year. We're working on some other things like having an honor guard so that we can do military funerals when the Marines are unable to. My detachment's kind of on the small side, but we're growing pretty fast. We're the 3rd fastest growing detachment in Tennessee, and currently we're the 5th largest and most active in the state.
Nice.
I'm also a member of the VFW here in town. I'm an officer at the American Legion in Nashville, Tennessee, and an officer of the Irreverent Warriors, which put on hikes all across the country, and we're getting to that a little bit later. I'm involved in a youth program called Young Marines of Rutherford County. It's kind of like Boy Scouts, but more badass. The upper leadership in the unit are Marine veterans, and we teach them the same goals that we had as Marines and still do: honor, courage, commitment. And the kids that go through this, they first off is co-ed. Unlike the Boy Scouts up until recently, it's completely co-ed. It always has been. There's a huge FBI background check for the adults. So if there's any parents out there looking to try to get their kids involved in something extracurricular, Young Marines is definitely a good program. Like I said, the adults have to go through FBI background check, so there's no danger in having the wrong person in charge watching your kids. Within a short period of time, you'll definitely start to see a drastic change in their behavior and their general courtesy and respect towards others. Other than that, I'm a husband and father of 2 kids, 17 and 19, so they're going to hopefully be getting out of the house soon. It'll just be me and the missus.
Ooh.
I'm excited for that, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. A change of pace.
Less drama, that's for sure.
Well, that's a lot. That's a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes how I figure out how to get this stuff done. But luckily, in all these organizations, every other member of the organization is just as dedicated to it as I am. So delegation is definitely key. And if there's something I can't get to, there's always somebody that can do it for me. So
yeah,
it seems like a lot, but with teamwork and cooperation, a lot can be accomplished.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, so you mentioned that you work with surgical equipment. How is that going right now in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic? And you're an essential employee, correct?
Yeah, about 60% of my job is actually physically touching the instruments as they come in. Like I said, I inspect them and make sure they're good for resale and all that. Yeah, I do have to be there every day. Right now, everybody in the company, except for the warehouse workers and myself, are all working remotely. Even the call center, all of them have laptops and able to forward the calls to their personal phones and all that. Mm-hmm. So everybody's working from home, which means I have it makes it a little bit harder for me because I've got conference calls I got to do now because my bosses want to make sure everything's good where I am and all that. And on top of that, the complaint engineers, when there's something that needs to be investigated, now I get to do a lot more of that investigation, which is interesting for me to do. I like doing that kind of stuff, but it definitely eats up a lot more time. To be honest, this past week, I've only actually done my job maybe 2 days.
Okay.
The rest of it was working on different side projects that somebody else had that I had to take over for them.
Gotcha.
On a larger scale, most of our products are designed for elective surgeries. So as the decline in elective surgeries occurs, our business is going to start to slow down. and there's concerns for that. We've already changed production in our Australia facility to start manufacturing PPE for the nurses and doctors, gowns and face masks and gloves and that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
So I'm proud that my company is doing something to help in the effort.
Mm-hmm.
And then our facility is basically on total lockdown. No outside people are allowed in. Even truck drivers, when they pull up to offload or pick up, they're met at the door, and they stay outside the entire time while we're unloading the trailer. Cleaning's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, our janitorial staff is working extra hard to clean the common areas, the kitchen, the bathrooms, and all that. And then I'm tasked with wiping down my workstation as often as possible. FDA regulations requires that I only use alcohol to clean my workstation.
Okay.
I can't use over-the-counter disinfectants like Lysol or anything like that. I have to use just pure alcohol and wipe everything down minimally once a day. I try to do it, especially if I'm handling an instrument that has been used in the procedure. Once I get done with that piece, I'll try to wipe down everything I've got, just so I can stave off any kind of cross-contamination with that.
Oh my goodness. Do you wear gloves?
Yeah.
Do you guys that are still there, do you wear masks too?
No, there was a talk about that, and my opinion was I was definitely against it. Using up masks every day, I feel, takes PPE away from the nurses and doctors that need it the most.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from an industry like the oil field where I used to work, PPE is essential. You can't do anything without having proper PPE on. It's important that it's maintained. And of course, the masks are mostly one-time use. You don't want to use them more often than one shift, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So for us to be wearing masks when we're just handling product that's already in packages to begin with, and a lot of times they're in sterile packaging that you have to break the seal before anything gets through onto them, I think it's a little bit overkill. So like I said, I was against it when the conversation was brought up.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it sounds like you guys are taking a lot of precautions and doing stuff to help as you can. And that seems to be a theme through all of your careers in life. We actually started talking about COVID-19 with your present job, but we actually decided to do this episode because you have a veteran's perspective on it. Before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit more about you and your servant's heart, and how has your definition of what it means to be human evolved from the last time you were on the show, if it has?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's not necessarily the definition, but the practice.
Okay.
Practicing empathy is something that has to constantly evolve as you meet new people, as the people you know and love go through different experiences. Even with my kids, being teenagers, everything changes on a daily basis with them. And I have to try my best to try to keep up with where their emotional state is. And one of my sons is struggling really bad with math, and I got to understand that before I start berating him about not doing his chores. Right now he's actually doing 3 different math courses to catch up, and that just wipes him out. And so I used to get on to him for sleeping during the day, taking long naps, but now I understand it tires him out. And so I got to use that empathy, because I've never been one to take naps at all. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, just the other night we got into an argument about this kind of stuff. And once we got heated emotions aside, we were able to sit down and have an honest conversation. And he told me where he was at, and now I know a little bit more. Now I can practice that empathy a little bit better and approach him. And I still need him to do what I need him to do, but I can approach it in a different way and make sure that the message gets across in a way that he can hear it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you are a veteran, a warrior, and you are a Marine.
Am.
Yeah, am a Marine. Okay, so it's like a lifelong thing.
Yeah, it's, unlike being a soldier or sailor or airman, the title Marine is something that's earned and is never taken away unless you disgrace a title.
Gotcha. So tell us, why did you join the military?
This is one of those questions that a lot of veterans get asked. Why did you join the Marines? Why did you join the Army? And there's a lot of PR kind of answers to that, patriotism, wanting to join the fight. Even some people said, well, I had nothing else to do. I knew Marines in the Corps that were actually mandated by a judge, either go to jail or go into the Marines.
Oh.
Honestly, those guys tend to be the best Marines, if you can imagine that. But for me, when I got to the point in high school that I needed to start thinking about what I was going to do next, I don't think I even considered anything else. Minimally, I was going to join the Marines and get money for college and go to college and do whatever else. But any of the different paths I considered, it always started with the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And then soon after, 3 months after I signed up, because I signed up right after my junior year in high school, September 11th happened, and that just completely blew shit out of the water. It was a amazing event to go through, and once I got over the initial shock, it was, you know what, I already signed up for this. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do what I can to help this fight. But ultimately, even before any of that happened, like I said, there was just no other choice for me. I guess it has to do with the way I idealized my dad. My dad was a Marine for 5 years before I was born, and grew up seeing pictures of him in his uniform and in his camis, and hearing stories about, this or that. Like I said, it just wasn't a choice. That was always something I was going to do.
Gotcha. So what made you start volunteering to support other military veterans?
Well, it kind of happened by accident. I think a lot of the reason why it appealed to me is because I was a Boy Scout in my younger days. And so community service is always something that I had been a part of. Maybe just cleaning up a highway or building a ramp for an elderly neighbor or something like that. But that community service and the feeling I got after doing a good job and helping somebody out was always something that I enjoyed doing as a kid. Once I graduated high school, went to the Marines and started doing that, and then I got out and was in the oil field. My career, my family took precedence. Mm-hmm. But once I got into my late 20s, I realized my career was at a point where I had more free time, and my family was growing up, and I didn't need to be home and change diapers. Well, I never did change their diapers, but I didn't have to. They didn't depend on me as much, so I had some more free time, and I just happened to meet a gentleman that was in the Marine Corps League in Lafayette, Louisiana when I was living there. And he invited me out to the meeting, and I'd known about the Marine Corps League because my dad was the commandant of the detachment I'm the commandant of now. So I went out to the meeting, became a member. A little while after that, though, we moved back up to Tennessee. When I got here, I asked Dad about when does the detachment meet, and he told me that they didn't. After he took a different job and had to leave the detachment, interest faded and they stopped meeting. So I took it upon myself to get with the state leadership and some other Marines, and we started the detachment back up. And that was a gateway into me joining these other organizations like Irreverent Warriors and the VFW and the American Legion. Again, it goes back to that feeling I get for helping other people. And with the struggles that veterans face today, I think there's no better place for me to start by helping my brothers and sisters in arms.
Yeah. So I imagine those suffering from PTSD or other trauma-related symptoms could be triggered by the global stress of this pandemic we're in. So what impact has the COVID-19 crisis had on the veterans that you support physically, mentally, all of it? And what about yourself, too?
Ironically, I think veterans have a unique skill set in this. First off, we're more comfortable being isolated from society. A lot of us don't feel that the general public can really understand what we're going through just as being a veteran and dealing with our PTSD issues. So the self-isolation and the social distancing, I think is ironically maybe a good thing for the veteran community.
Okay.
But it's also kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that once things start to get back to normal, the veterans are going to still be isolating themselves, and it's going to be important for us to get out there and talk to our brothers and sisters and say, hey, let's go down to the VFW, go have a beer. We got to get these veterans that are choosing to stay at home even after it's safe to come out. We got to get them to poke their heads out and dip their toes in the water again and become more social, because the more they isolate themselves, the more their feelings will creep up, and the symptoms of PTSD like depression and anxiety will be more common in them. But now that we're at the start of this, it's right now they're being comfortable. Mm-hmm. But as it progresses, they will start to have issues. And even before things get back to normal, we're going to have to take it upon ourselves as veterans to reach out to our brothers and sisters. We may be on Facebook, text messages, phone calls, whatever. Mm-hmm. But reach out to them, make sure that everybody's okay. I've got a few elderly veterans in my organizations. One in particular, he's being forced to self-isolate 100% because of his health. His doctor doesn't want him to go out in public at all. It's just in case he gets exposed to COVID, he's definitely in that group that it's going to be more severe for. So later on today, I'm actually going to go over and drop off some supplies for him, just to make sure he's got enough to carry on so that he doesn't have to go out and face this.
Yeah. Well, that's really great that you're helping him. And at the end of this interview, if you want to list ways for other people to help, if you know of where people can bring supplies or anything like that to help support your organizations, we'll list those also in the show notes. So that would be good. Okay. So right now, we're talking about COVID-19. It's also known as the coronavirus disease, which is caused by the SARS-CoV-2, that's SARS-CoV-2 virus, also known as the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. So this is a pandemic, a health situation that has side effects on our local and global economies and our society. It's a threat, but not one caused by enemies we would normally think of during a war or why we would normally need national security. So can you tell us why call the military in to help in a situation like this?
It just makes good sense. Right now, New York Police Department is being decimated by COVID-19. I heard on the news a couple hundred police officers in New York City are out sick for the next 2 weeks because they either have it or they were exposed to it. And so they're having to self-quarantine for 14 days. With that, obviously we still have to have some law and order. Calling in the National Guard, like many of these governors are doing, it's a great way to supplement your infrastructure. Not only that, but aside from police activities, you also have doctors and nurses and corpsmen in the National Guard that can help out with the hospitals and all that. And, even if it's just a regular PFC infantryman, at least he can be there, obviously in the appropriate PPE, to help with the intake of patients at the hospitals. There's a lot of talk on Facebook about this being close to a martial law kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it really is. Just like if there was a massive flood, like what happened in Tennessee in 2010, mm-hmm. You're going to call in the National Guard whenever there's a disaster, and this is a disaster.
Yeah. So, Andy, we're in Tennessee. You and I are in towns about 45 minutes apart from one another, but both have declared states of emergency, as well as the state and our entire country. From a veteran's perspective, do you think the different levels of government are handling this crisis as they should? And let's break it down to local, state, and national levels.
Well, I think the first thing you have to understand is nobody was prepared for this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we dealt with epidemics and pandemics before, but even Dr. Fauci, who we've all seen on TV as the leading expert in infectious diseases, he has stated that before this happened, when people would ask him about what's his biggest nightmare, he literally describes what's happening now. This is a situation so grand and so dire, nobody was prepared for it. With that in mind, I think everybody needs to be looking at the government's actions through that kind of looking glass. Mm-hmm. Is there places where President Trump could be doing a little bit better? Sure. Is there places where Governor Bill Lee, the governor of Tennessee, could be doing better. Yes, definitely. And even the local governments, for sure. I think the Safer at Home initiative that Bill Lee has put into place is a good start. I think we need to probably continue that going forward. If there's one defense against the COVID-19, it's limiting social interactions, maintaining that 6 to 10 foot distance, washing your hands as often as possible, using antibacterial hand lotion, Purell, whatever, if you can find it. People are hoarding that stuff. To be honest, it's not the government that I'm disappointed in, because I can look at things from that perspective of nobody was prepared for. It's the general public I'm disappointed in. There's no reason why anybody should be hoarding toilet paper or paper towels or hand sanitizer, because all that does is takes that resource away from other people. Particularly if there's elderly out there that can't get to the store every day. The only reason why we have toilet paper in my house right now is because I wake up with the boys at 6 o'clock in the morning every morning, give them $40 and tell them to go to Walmart and see if they can buy toilet paper. They've done it every day this week, and finally, just yesterday, they were able to come back with 2 things of toilet paper. Now, they could have got more, but I told them not to. I told them just get 2 packages of toilet paper and come back, because we're not going to hoard it. We're not going to take it away from somebody else. 2 12-packs is going to last us, probably a month. So that's all we need.
Yeah.
And once we get low, we'll start looking for more. The public in general, they'll take these crises and panic and go out and panic buy, and it ends up just decimating everybody else's ability to get what they need. In my opinion, it's unneeded and selfish. Again, it's one of those places where people could exercise some more empathy and realize that, they don't need 12 packs of toilet paper to last them until May.
Yeah, definitely. Empathy right now in all areas seems really huge. And I like what you had to say. We're humans. This is sort of unprecedented in most of our lifetimes.
I think it's also equally important to point out that you do see a lot of empathy. I think on the news this morning there was a video of some guy just filming New York City from his balcony, and you could hear cheers and applauds coming from just everywhere in the city, applauding the first responders, and the nurses and doctors are doing everything they do and putting themselves in harm's way. There's also, I saw a video of a neighborhood singing the Won't You Be My Neighbor song from Mr. Rogers. So there is a lot of examples of empathy going out there and people trying to cheer each other up. I like the hashtag isolated but not alone. This is something that's happening more recently. When the whole corona news started coming out, that's when everybody was doing the hoarding and all that. So I think in a large part, maybe we're developing a better sense of empathy as we go through this crisis, which is great. Just maybe we should have been practicing a little bit more sooner.
Yeah, there are definitely positive things that will come out of this. I believe, like you said, with the empathy, that it's spreading, and hopefully we'll be able to look at the systems that aren't working, that are sort of collapsing, and rebuild in a different, better way. We sort of came full circle with the empathy discussion, but something else that we can connect here is that veterans, I think, are sort of trained to not panic in these situations. What advice do you have for people to not panic?
Well, educate yourself. I think it's the most important thing. The studies show that 80% of diagnosed cases have mild symptoms and are mostly survivable. But also the studies show that, at least in Tennessee, the biggest demographic that's contracting the virus is from 21 to 35, which means to me that the younger people my age, I'm 36, but close enough, we're not taking this as seriously as we should be. We're not taking the precautions that we maybe should be doing. Like I said before, I'm kind of in a high-risk profession in the sense I'm touching things that were touched by doctors and nurses, and sometimes actually used inside a person on a procedure. Mm-hmm. So, I'm washing my hands more than I ever have in my life. I'm using hand sanitizers more than I ever had in my life. I'm wearing gloves more than I ever have in my life. I've been in some dangerous situations in Iraq, and even still, I'm taking a lot more precautions now, mainly because if I get anything, I'm still living at home, so I don't want to bring it home to my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm. What precautions are you guys taking at home to protect your family?
My kids are kind of social butterflies. They're not social butterflies to begin with. They spend a lot of their time on the Xbox anyway. So like they've been practicing social distancing for 3 years now.
Okay.
Even when they're in the house with me, I usually only see them when they come out when I'm making dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've got a lot of risk at work to pick up stuff like this, so I take my own precautions. My wife also works at the airport here in Nashville, so she's having to take some precautions and wash her hands more often, use hand sanitizers as often as possible, stay away from people, which actually come the first, it's going to be easier for her to do that because she's been furloughed for 2 months.
Okay.
Which makes sense. It's not something that anybody wanted necessarily, but if there's no business at the airport, there's no need to have 20 people on staff at the restaurant. Mm-hmm. We only go out for essential things. We do tend to try to order out food as often as we can because we want to help out the local businesses as much as we can. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to dial that back because of her work situation. Mm-hmm. But we're still going to try to get business out there as much as we can, keeping in mind our present condition.
Gotcha. So when we started talking about doing this episode for season 2, you were really excited to talk about the Irreverent Warriors Silkies hike that goes on every year. You and your colleagues were getting geared up to spread the word and make the fun happen. So what are the plans now for this type of massive crowd event?
Well, so a little bit of background. So these Silky hikes, they're veteran-only hikes that happen all across the country. And the first one happened back at the end of January. But unfortunately, with the coronavirus pandemic, they've had to at least postpone every hike. I think they made the decision in the middle of February, every hike from that point on to the middle of May. So those hikes are being postponed for later on in the year for obvious reasons. These hikes get up to the one in Nashville last year was 225 veterans. The one in Oceanside, California was over 1,000 veterans. So obviously a gathering like that just doesn't need to take place, and it's going to do more harm than good. Mm-hmm. But ultimately the goal of these hikes is to get these veterans out of their shells, and that I think is going to be even more important once things die down with the coronavirus, to get them out of their homes, out of the shells, and get out in public, have a good time, dress in funny attire, and meet veterans in the area that are dealing with the same kind of struggles that they're dealing with, so that at least when they're down and they're depressed and they're feeling, suicidal. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing. We're staving off suicide. When they get to that point where they're ready to put the gun in their mouth, they know that there's 6 people they can call on that understand where they're coming from, been in situations that they've been in like that before, and can minimally just have somebody to talk to, have somebody to go have a beer with. Just that social interaction is important for anybody, mm-hmm. But for veterans it's a little more difficult because veterans have seen and done things that most civilians would never even dream of. I'm sure there's only a few civilians who can say they've jumped out of helicopters or they've seen some of the gory stuff that I've seen personally. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to feel comfortable being ourselves around people that haven't had those experiences or something similar to. So these hikes get to be cathartic. They're relaxing. It gives these veterans a chance to let their hair down a little bit and have a good time and realize that there's people that can call on. The one I'm the core coordinator for is the one in Nashville. We're planning it for September 12th, which is also George Jones's birthday.
Awesome.
And we're talking with the George Jones Bar to get them involved in it because if you don't know, he's a Marine. If you've heard the stories about George Jones and his alcohol addiction, he's definitely an irreverent warrior. Anybody that would jump on his riding lawnmower to go to the liquor store to buy some more booze, I think in large part some of the stuff he went through may have been from PTSD-like symptoms.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great opportunity for his legacy to be a part of the Irreverent Warriors story. Along with that, we're going to have some local talent, some local artists, musicians to play some acoustic sets along the hike. It's a 10.5-mile hike all through Nashville. We're going to be starting at Nissan Stadium, make our way gradually to Centennial Park, have lunch there, and then make our way back to Nissan Stadium with bar stops and water stops and fun activities all along the way.
Sounds amazing.
Oh, yeah, no, last year's hike was fun. I went to the Memphis hike last year as well, and that's something else that's great. Tennessee is going to have at least 4 hikes this year: Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. We're also working on maybe doing a Clarksville hike, and I think there's another city we're considering, and even Bowling Green, Kentucky is we're going to see about having a hike up that way too. It's really starting to be this huge yearly event where any given weekend there's a hike going on. It's just a matter of getting to it. For me, it's amazing. Some of the shit that you see these guys doing, dancing to Britney Spears, "Oops, I Did It Again," that kind of stuff. It's funny to watch, but the thing is, I saw a couple Navy corpsmen dancing to "Oops, I Did It Again" in Memphis, and it actually brought a tear to my eye because I realized that this is the kind of people that they used to be when they were in the service, and this is the kind of people they want to be. These jovial, making fun of everything they can kind of people. Mm-hmm. But so often we feel like we can't do that in regular society because it's not necessarily the PC thing to do. But at least for one day out of the year, or maybe multiple days out of the year, if they can get out to more hikes, they get to be that person again. And so it's comforting for them to be able to, like I said, let their hair down and just be these irreverent sons of bitches again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If someone wants to follow the changes for Irreverent Warriors plans as they occur, where should they go online?
All right, so there's many places they can go. First off, the Irreverent Warriors website is irreverentwarriors.com. And there they have the full hike schedule. And you can also purchase hats and T-shirts and mugs and all that kind of stuff. And they keep that updated pretty good. So any of the hikes that are being canceled or postponed, those are up there as well. Also, nearly every single hike has their own Facebook page. So you can go to Facebook and just start typing in Irreverent Warriors and then any major city near you. And you should be able to find a Facebook page pertaining to just that hike. In Tennessee, like I said, we've got Irreverent Warriors Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, and we even have a Irreverent Warriors Tennessee page for everybody to go to. All these pages are again, updated as much as possible. You can even find other events that the organization is putting on in between hikes. Like in Nashville, we try to do an event once a month to get everybody together so we can keep interest growing as we get closer to the hike. Of course, now, obviously, a lot of stuff is being put on hold or postponed at least. Like the pages anyway, because at least that the posts that hit the page, that'll still keep you connected. And sometimes it's just funny shit that veterans understand. Sometimes it's probably stuff that most people wouldn't want to see, but it's stuff that we can relate to and we either find funny or maybe important in some way. So,
yeah.
Along with that, the other organizations, most of them have websites. American Legion National has got a website. All the posts in Nashville, they've got websites as well. VFWs, if any of these organizations don't have websites, they at least have Facebook pages now. I encourage anybody to, especially veterans, find these groups on Facebook, like them, follow them. And then not only that, but once everything dies down, go to your local VFW, have a beer, meet somebody new there, go to the American Legion posts, have a beer, meet somebody new, talk to these people. Some of them are from Korea, some of them are from Vietnam, but some of them are our age, from Iraq and Afghanistan era. Ultimately, if you can make another connection, that's one more Marine, soldier, or sailor you have in the fight to help you move forward with your PTSD or any other condition you may have carried over from the service.
Gotcha. So a couple more things. Are there other ways you're supporting veterans virtually during this time so they can connect? What are some resources that impacted veterans or those supporting them can use in terms of mental health? And then if people want to help donate supplies, where can they do that? What can they do to help?
All right, so as far as what I'm doing virtually to help other veterans, I've talked about it a lot, but Facebook is a central point for us to be able to connect, not just locally, but globally, really. I got a Marine buddy of mine that lives in the Philippines. I've got another one that just moved from Alaska down to Kansas. And through Facebook, I'll send out buddy checks every once in a while to see how everybody's doing mentally, if there's any concerns. I scan Facebook all the time to see that dreaded post saying, I've had enough, I'm giving up, bye. And then instantly, not only am I getting on there to make a comment to try to reach out to them, but I look at their profile and see what state they're in, and then I try to find other veterans in that state to see if I can get somebody to go do a drive-by and do a welfare check. I talk about alcohol a lot, but alcohol it helps and it hurts if we do it in moderation. Maybe I can get somebody to come by with a 6-pack and sit down with the veteran and just talk shit out. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing that I hated about the whole social distancing is my detachment can't do a bingo night at a VA hospital anymore. As of the beginning of March, the VA hospital in Murfreesboro has shut the doors. Mm-hmm. So there's no outside entities are allowed in. We usually do on the third Friday of every month, we host a bingo night for the veterans. We give them cash prizes and we feed them a good dinner. And it's the highlight of my month. I love doing it. The patients at the VA hospital were so grateful they were there to show them a good time. And it kills me that we can't do it anymore. The hospital was right to make that call. Don't misunderstand me. But mm-hmm. It's such a great thing to do for these patients that some of them we'll never get out of that hospital alive. And for us to give them just one night where they can maybe forget about everything that's going on with them, with their health, their mental state, I think is a great thing for them. And like I said, I freaking love doing it. Mm-hmm. Other things that have been impacted, well, any kind of gathering that we had on the books, maybe just a picnic or standing in front of the maybe Home Depot or Lowe's to collect donations and stuff like that. Obviously, we can't do any of that stuff now. So it's putting a halt on most of the good we try to do out in public to either make sure people are aware of the struggles that veterans go through or raise money so that we can help ourselves. Mm-hmm. The second question was, what can other people do to help these organizations? The two most important things when it comes to any kind of charity, the two most important things you can donate is either time or money. Now, I'm not here trying to pander for people to donate money to my group or any other group I'm associated with, but if you want to be charitable, those are the two most important resources you can give. Like I said before, all of these organizations either have a website or a Facebook page. And through that, you can find some way to either give your time or your money. And it may be just if you know a veteran that's going through some shit, maybe take the time and saying, hey, Bill, Joe, whoever, look these guys up. Maybe there's somebody here you can talk to that knows what you're going through. It's amazing. I've got Vietnam era veterans in my group and my era veterans, and even though the Vietnam era veterans are old enough to be my dad or even my grandpa, we can still relate to the same kind of shit. We talk just like we've been old friends for years, even though I may have just met them that night. Mm-hmm. And like I said, being able to connect with somebody that knows where you're coming from, that's so important.
Gotcha. All right. And Andy, do you have any closing wisdom to leave for our listeners?
Well, I'm gonna talk to your listeners in two different groups. First, the veterans. Guys, If you're going through hard times, all you got to do is ask. Reach out to somebody. We're here for you, just like we were when we were in the service. When we wore that uniform, we're gonna be here for you now as well. And then for everybody else, including the veterans and civilians, wash your damn hands. Stay home as much as you can. There's many people out that have to be out and about, and they're doing that for your good. I've talked about what I do, but my dad's also a truck driver. He's on the road right now. And because of people going out when they don't need to be, there's fewer and fewer places that my dad can stop to get food or even go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. The entire state of Pennsylvania for a week shut down all truck stops.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing to me, because if you have no idea, my dad's truck gets about 6 miles to the gallon. Now, he holds something like 250 gallons of diesel, but he still has to fill up at least daily. So if he goes through Pennsylvania, he better hope he can get through all the way without having to stop, not just for gas, but just to take a piss.
Yeah.
Not only that, but my dad's on the road for a week at a time. So these truck stops often have shower facilities. And I don't know about you, but I'd be smelling pretty bad if I was cooped up in the truck for a week without a shower. So
yeah, people are panicking because they don't have supplies, but these truck drivers are the ones getting the supplies to people. So we have to make good decisions to keep it going. We really do.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show again. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
I do too.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in weekly at onbeinghumanpodcast.com for more soul-exposing explorations of what it means to be human. Until next week, love to you all.